Republican Trey Hollingsworth won Indiana's 9th district in 2016 amid a conservative swell led by President Donald Trump. Now, as Tyler Lake reports, Hollingsworth is fighting to keep his seat in Congress, but he's up against opponents on the left and the right. They call him an opportunist and an outsider, pointing to his self-financed campaign and his Tennessee roots.
With less than 2 years in Congress, Trey Hollingsworth hasn't had much time in Washington to demonstrate how his policies have improved the 9th District, which stretches from Greenwood to New Albany. But he says 9th District voters have benefited from his work to grow the economy.
We've seen some tremendous strides, real and meaningful wage growth, real and meaningful job creation, real and meaningful expansion by small businesses, and I think that's so important all the way across the district.
But many Indiana voters have come out in force to say that Hollingsworth doesn't have their best interest in mind. James Dean Alspach hopes he can win those Hoosier voters. He's challenging Hollingsworth in the primary.
Everyone deserves to have their candidacy challenged and have their ideas put through the crucible of public opinion. I'd have to give him a mixed grade. No, he hasn't done a good job.
While full of fiery rhetoric, Alspach's fundraising numbers are nearly non-existent and stand in stark contrast to the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the Hollingsworth campaign coffers. 3 Democrats are vying for the nomination to stand against Hollingsworth in the general election: Liz Watson, Dan Cannon, and Robert Chatlos. Political analyst Andrew Downs says all races are winnable, but for a Democrat to win the 9th District, they'll need something extra.
You need things like the Me Too movement or the women's movement, or pick any other movement that seems to be aligned with Democratic principles or principles of the Democratic Party. Those are probably all going to have to line up just right.
But that hasn't cowed the Democratic candidates, who have had multiple debates and public forums to engage with folks in the 9th District. Robert Chatlos is a truck driver and political outsider who hopes his blue-collar roots might be exactly what 9th District voters are looking for.
I represent everybody in this district, from the homeless person to the wealthiest person that's in the borders of this district.
He says his straightforward style might offend some voters, but says his candor is what is needed in this political environment. Like Alspach, Chatlos hasn't been able to accumulate a lot of money for his campaign. But he's confident in his grassroots approach and says his efforts are about getting voters' support, not necessarily their donations. The 2 frontrunners in the Democratic primary have each raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Both have spent years in public service but have drastically different backgrounds. Liz Watson has spent the past several years in Washington advocating for women and the working poor. She wrote public policy in her time as the labor policy director for the Democrats in Congress.
I did things like work with the staff for Senator Elizabeth Warren. I worked with some of our real progressive champions on some of the issues that people said, this is just the way it is today. People get treated like dirt at work. And I said, no, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We can change that.
Dan Cannon has been a civil rights attorney. He has worked in Indiana and Kentucky representing teachers, labor unions, and veterans. He also worked on a landmark case that guaranteed same-sex couples the right to marry. He says his unusual background and willingness to fight for those in need make him the best candidate.
Dropped out of high school when I was 17 and have been self-employed here, have been, I've had to live hand to mouth, and I've had to go without health insurance. I've had to take on student loan debt and all that kind of stuff that normal people do in the 9th District.
During town halls and debates over the last year, a big face was missing: Hollingsworth. Some Hoosiers point to this as proof the Tennessee native is not in touch with those he represents.
Hey, Trey, talk to me! Hey, Trey, talk to me!
With the election less than a week away, the candidates are sprinting across the district, making phone calls and reaching out to voters. Hollingsworth's on track to handily win the Republican primary. If he does, his job in the general election may be to connect with 9th District voters and convince them that he is listening to their voices. And whoever wins the Democratic battle will likely go up against the name recognition and deep pockets of the Hollingsworth campaign. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Tyler Lake.